my first MAC race was in 1963, and it was with an opportunity to crew on Talisman, which was a Trip 30 owned by George Quandy out of Jackson Harbor. And I was always intrigued by the MAC race, and had done very little sailing, some, but very little sailing up to that point. And I can still remember I had this vision of the MAC race as being something very social, very serious, very big, to the point where I even brought along a sport coat and tie and hung it up in the locker of the boat, because I thought when we got to the island it's a big social occasion and I should be prepared for it. So I've made a total of 38 races since then. I have specific memories. I don't know how fond they are. What I do remember was I got seasick about 2 hours after the start, and really wasn't on my legs again until about 36 hours later. So that's probably my fondest memory. Favorite or most challenging, in my mind, I think, is the Manitou portion, because in my experience anyway, you can run into such a variety of wind conditions, particularly going through that segment of that leg. And I've had more than my share of frustrations in being on the wrong side when the wind was light, working my way diligently over to the other side, only to find that I'm still on the wrong side. It's not over there. So I guess that would be my leg that I would say is most challenging. Well, I think the one that stands out in my mind was a race in 1977. We had been doing exceptionally well. We knew we were probably the lead boat in our section, and we were halfway between the bridge and the island, and the wind just died away totally, and we were becalmed. There wasn't a boat near us. We looked back down the straits, and miles back, I mean literally miles, we could see a bunch of chutes, and they came up to us on a filling wind, and we just had to be totally frustrated and sit there and watch as they came up with us and we're not doing anything. And of course the lead boat happened to be a sister ship of ours, and the wind was very light. She went slowly, glided by us, past us to weather after being 6 to 8 miles behind us. And then the wind, we caught the filling wind. We just happened to have a jib up. She had a chute up. We ended up cutting underneath her transom, going past her, and beat her by less than a minute to the islands. Oh, sure. I mean, there are the usual ones, but for us, I think we tended to go to the Mustang, get away from the big crowds, and we'd gather there every year. Well, navigation-wise, I think the most challenging one was, I think this was in 1973, which was before Loran, before GPS, when the race was, particularly as we got north up around close to Frankfurt, was basically fogged in, and we had to, just with dead reckoning and RDF, work our way from there up to the island. And I remember the only land we saw was the back side of Sleepy Bear. We saw a little bit of that, and the next piece of land we saw was the Upper Peninsula. So yeah, that was a challenging one to work your way through. Well, yeah, terrifying probably. In that same area, going up, entering the Manitou Passage, my favorite spot, as I mentioned. One year, at night, the middle of the night, blowing light stink, dead down, and I was just come on watch and took over the helm, and probably was still half asleep, and next thing we know, we took a flying jibe, and the wind was we just laid over so far. The starboard winches were underwater. I remember we couldn't get down to even release the sheet on the chute. The boom was dragging in the water. whole bunch of boats were coming up at hull speed behind us in the middle of the night, not knowing what was going on with us. And fortunately, we managed to, I think we ended up letting the guy run, which doused the chute, and the boat stood back up. We still had the mast, we still had the spinnaker pole, and even though one of our crew members later said that at that point he was about ready to get off the boat. So that's probably the most terrifying that I've been through, I guess. That would have been the 1970 Mac rise, which is famous for the weather. And I happened at that point to be crewing with Dick Jennings on Dick's first boat, which was a Cyril 28, not called Pied Piper, but called Vulgar. And we were probably the smallest boat in the fleet. It was just a little cuddy cabin on an outboard mounted in a well in the back. And we were working our way just like the little cork that we were, and we were probably, I'm guessing, 15 to 20 miles south of Frankfurt, and obviously making a little distance over the bottom and taking a lot of water over, and good-sized cockpit was not draining very quickly. And Dick sort of said, well, what do you think, guys? You know, how serious are you about this race? And the consensus was very quickly, if we have a chance to get off the lake, let's do that. So I can remember that at that point we turned around and started running down the coast. And a couple points that I remember was, he said, well, has anybody been into, we were looking for Manistee, I think, at this point, because that was the only decent harbor we could duck into. And has anybody ever been to Manistee before? No. Well, let's get out the charts. Well, I don't have charts, but I've got the LMYA book. If you remember the old blue LMYA book. So we're, okay, here's the harbor. That's all we had there. And then we had such, the boat was so small and the seas are so high. We had a reef main, and that's all we were running on. But the boat would get down in the trough of the sea, and the whole main would be blanketed. And then you'd ride back up again, and the main would fill out like a chute fills out. So the seas were pretty good, and that's probably my most awesome time. Fortunately, again, we got in with no trouble, so, and we survived. We're looking forward to the 101 running. It's going to be something special, and I'm certainly hoping to be a part of that. And as we were talking earlier, this whole MAC experience is certainly contagious.
Mr. HIllstrom, thank you very much.